Screenagers, welcome back to another episode of the Canon. Joined today by Dhalgren to talk about Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, the great 1979 Russian sci-fi movie. I'm very excited to talk about this with you, Dal. It is a very meaty movie. In many ways, it's really different from a lot of the movies that we talk about on the Canon. But before we get into any of that, we do have to talk about something else. There is pretty big news out of the Screen Age Wasteland world, and a lot of it has to do with stuff that you've been doing, Dal. You kicked off the Screen Age Wasteland YouTube page. You've been uploading your some video essays, that were previously posted on the Screen Age Wasteland website under the series of the, I think it's Welcome into the Dollhouse. Is that the right name of it, or did I totally?
Yeah, I think we just call it. Yeah, I think Duke came up with that. We just call it Dollhouse on the Dollhouse or whatever. And
the Dollhouse.
I don't even know if that's going to stick in terms of the YouTube channel, but yeah.
But yeah, very exciting. There's a Screen Age Wasteland YouTube page. It features, I think there are 3 or 4 video essays, features from the Dollhouse that you put together, wrote, edited, produced, all that good stuff. So I wanted to give you the time here on this other Screen Age Wasteland outlet to promote what's going on the YouTube page and sort of talk through what you're hoping to do there and, continue to grow with what's going on with the Dollhouse.
Yeah, for me personally, I'm looking to do one video editorial a week. At some point, I may transition just to kind of winging the videos instead of writing them. I'm writing them and then dual posting to screenagewasteland.com and then to our YouTube page. But yeah, some of it's new, some of it's older stuff that I'm just recording videos for. Like I said, want to do at least one of those a week. I'd like to get other people on board. That's something I want to kind of discuss with the group in the new year. So yeah, we're in the new year, so I need to get that going. But other than that, man, I mean, we've got a wealth of stuff on the YouTube page right now, thanks to you. So, for everyone out there listening, if you don't have a preferred podcast platform and you use YouTube, then go find those Canon episodes on there and help us get some better visibility. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an exciting new frontier for everyone at Screen Age Wasteland. We've got some old episodes of the Canon up there. You might eventually at some point be listening to this episode of the Canon on YouTube. We'll probably try to get some episodes of Total Recast up there. Like Dahl said, continuing to expand what we're doing with the Dollhouse, maybe getting some other folks to do video essays. It's really exciting. If you don't already subscribe to the Screen Age Wasteland YouTube page, I think it's just youtube.com/Screen Age Wasteland. Hit us with a subscribe. You can check out all of the Dollhouse episodes. You can check or videos. You can check out the older episodes of the Canon that are up there, and just be on the lookout for new videos as they continue to pop up. But
yeah, I've got a bunch of ideas for videos. I'm finishing up one right now, and I just kind of want to blow where the wind takes me. The Dollhouse is just sort of a free form. Like, it kind of started as like not really a column because it wasn't regular enough to be a column, but sort of that flavor where it's just whatever I'm thinking about or watching. And like you said, I think Duke and Sailor are going to eventually have some Total Recast up. And so, yeah, whatever else we can cook up. But, it's, as I'm sure it takes time to do all this stuff. So we're just doing the best we can right now. But we appreciate any subs we get.
Any subs, any views, any likes, any shares, all that good stuff. But it's definitely worth checking out. I've been a big fan of, watching these Dollhouse videos as they pop up. And even just like, it's been around, YouTube page has been around for a month. And I feel like, me personally, like I'm already seeing growth and development in terms of how the videos are put together. So, it's a new year. There's a lot to be excited about. We got the YouTube page. We have the website proper. We've got a couple of podcasts. Like things are looking up for Screen Age Wasteland.
Right on. I mean, today YouTube, tomorrow the world.
Hell yeah. I love it. Speaking of the new year, things looking up, big and better things being on the horizon for all of us at Screen Age Wasteland and all of our, lovely listeners and viewers and readers and those folks as well. Sailor and I last week, we discussed a little bit some New Year resolutions that we had. So because the New Year is still kind of fresh, I know we're already in like the third week of the year. January's already more than halfway through. Either way, this whole month for everyone who's coming on the show, I do want to ask the question, whether or not you have any movie related or maybe it's content producing specific, New Year resolutions that you might have. So, Dahl, do you have anything that you want to do in 2024, either movie related or like somewhat adjacent? All good if you don't, but I wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, nothing formal. I mean, I'd like to get to the theater more often, and my wife and I have had a little bit of an uptick with little one. We end up seeing more kiddie shows than we used to, 10 years ago. But and actually, some of those have been really good. I mean, Puss in Boots and Ninja Turtles were really good. I didn't love Mario Brothers as much as everybody else seemed to, but I have actually enjoyed some of these kids movies. But yeah, I'd like to get out to the theater more in the new year. I think if anything, I'm trying to be a little bit more intentional this year about what I watch. I've spent a lot of time revisiting older stuff and covering ground that I never did before. So like some obvious stuff that I missed, like Big Trouble in Little China probably being one of the bigger ones at my age.
Oh, nice.
The fact that I had never seen that is kind of bizarre. So it's cool that there's still nuggets like that out there for me to discover. Yeah. So I'm finishing a really slow watch, or I should say continuing a really slow watch of The X-Files. I never watched it the first time around.
Oh, so,
yeah, man, I haven't found a lot of new stuff super satisfying in the last 3 to 4 years. Maybe pandemic has something to do with that. I don't know. I don't think writers are just that great these days. I have problems with that, but for whatever reason, I've been digging out the old stuff. I'd like to keep trying to find the gems that are out there that are new. So Sailor's a good resource for that, but really any of the other guys and gals on Screen Age are more well versed in newer movies than I am these days. So I keep my eyes open, my ears open for stuff that seems to get traction with my friends on there, and so I want to get a little better about digging those up.
Sweet.
I tend to be really hard on newer movies, but I saw a movie called The Wonder on Netflix, and I think that came out. It was either 2022 or 2023, and I just thought it was fantastic. Really, really good movie. So I guess those are my three things.
I love it. Checking out some older things, getting to the theaters, and I guess with going to the theaters, finding some of those like hidden nuggets in the newer movies that are coming out. I like that. Right on. I feel like going to the theater is always, I don't know, it's always a blast. Even if the newer crop of movies aren't as great as, the classics and like the movies that we talk about on this show, the most essential movies of all time, there is still something kind of nice about just giving yourself up to a movie for 2.5 hours, not connected to any devices or the outside world. You're just in a dark room with strangers and you guys all experience the same emotional trip together, whether it be, you hope it's a great emotional trip, but sometimes even if it's just kind of meh, the fact that you're like at the theater is, in my opinion, pretty special. So I totally dig that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's a part of the value that going to the theater has, I think, is subjecting yourself to some risk, the risk of, I might not like this. I mean, if you're sitting at home watching a feature that just came out, I mean, if you paid $20 or $30 to rent it or buy it or whatever, you may not just turn it off. But if you're watching something that was just, hit the theater and was released to streaming at the same time, if you don't like it within the first 5 minutes, you can just skip out on it. But if you paid for your ticket and you went out to the theater and, took all that time and trouble, you're going to watch it. I mean, we saw Ferrari recently and we didn't love it. It's an interesting question. I just thought, I wonder if we would have watched the whole thing from home. I bet we would have broken it into 2 parts, but
interesting.
But at one point I looked over to my left and the couple that was sitting on the back row at the far end, they were gone. Like maybe 3/4 of the way through the movie, they were just gone.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if they just got tired of it and just got up or what, but yeah, I think there's some value to that. And I wrote something about this on Screen Age a while back about going to see Titane without any, I'm assuming I don't know if I'm pronouncing that the right way.
The like kooky French movie.
Yeah, kooky. That's a good way to put it. But we went and saw that without even watching a trailer, and my wife, the look on her face, man, within like the first 15 minutes of that movie, she was like, "What did you bring me to?" And
that's a wild one to see in theaters. Yeah,
I think there's value in that. I think there's value in not getting, not knowing exactly what you're going to get and getting exactly what you want every time. Like So anyway,
yeah. That risk factor is, I think it's important to take as like audience members for us to be willing to risk, 3 hours on a movie that we might like, might not like. But then also like the flip side of that is it's important for studios and movie producers to take those same gambles on movies that might not totally click with everyone or might be so well made that it becomes a huge sensation or whatever. And I feel like on that side of the equation, right, the studio producer side, we're not seeing as many of those big swings. And that then has like caused us as audience members to only want to go to the theaters for like the things that are safe bets. So I think we sort of need to like retrain ourselves as audience members to seek out those movies that might be a little challenging, that might be a little out there, that might be a kooky French movie about a woman who has sex with a car, it's,
I couldn't agree more.
And like to bring it back to the movie that we're talking about today, Stalker is a movie that requires like a lot of investment from audience members. And, when this movie came out, it wasn't, I don't think that this was necessarily a huge like commercial hit, but it's found an audience over time because people have been willing to take the risk on trying to engage with it on a deeper level. And the more that we like seek out movies like this, I feel like this is something that you talk about a lot, Dahl. The more that we force ourselves to seek out movies like this, just like the better we become as audience members. And then that then in turn make sure that the powers that be are putting out movies that are more in line with this and less in line with just, some sort of assembly line thing that is just there to continue the IP and like sell a guaranteed number of tickets. So I think on both sides, on both audience and producer side, it's important for movies like Stalker to be in the zeitgeist and like something that we talk about and something that people seek out, because it does make things better for everyone. That's my weird way of trying to tie your resolutions into the movie topic of the day. I don't know if I did a good job, but we tried.
I think you did. I think that was a great segue, Raph.
I appreciate that. So let's talk about Stalker, because this is a really interesting movie. When I was going through the list of movies that are in the canon, I feel like I talk about this a lot on the show, but there are some movies, there are some omissions that surprised me. There are some inclusions that I question because I don't know if they're necessarily movies that I would consider essential. And then there are movies like Stalker that I saw on the list and I got really excited because this is a movie that, again, it's really out there. It's a really difficult sell for especially modern audiences. But I do think that this is essential viewing for anyone who wants to consider themselves a film fan, even though it's really hard. So I think where I want to start with you, Dahl, is I just want to know, how did you first come across this movie? How did you become so connected to it? Is this, you know what? I'm going to leave it at those two questions because I have
Yeah,
1,000 questions and I don't want to throw all of them at you at once. I'll try to space them out a little bit. So how did you first
good.
come across this weird sci-fi, deeply philosophical 70s Russian movie?
Hey, thanks for taking pity on me because I've got the memory of a squirrel. Probably worse than that, memory of a gnat. So I probably wouldn't have remembered any questions beyond that anyway. But yeah, this is an easy one. In college, okay, I took a course called Russian Sci-Fi and Literature in Film and Literature, something like that.
Dang.
And the professor had us read the novella that Stalker's based on. It's called Roadside Picnic
Mm-hmm.
by the Strugatsky brothers. Yeah, I don't remember what their first names are, but we read
Mm-hmm.
that. We read that short story, novella, whatever you want to call it, and then he did a screening of Stalker for us. And so we went to one of the auditoriums one evening, and brought our popcorn and whatever, and we watched this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I had no idea what to expect, dude. I mean, like I had no foundation for Russian cinema, and to be really honest with you, I still don't. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Russian movies,
Mm-hmm.
Soviet era movies or whatever. But I don't know, man. I went into that theater, the lights went down, and that opening scene hit me, and I just I don't know. The movie just washed over me like, like warm ocean waters. It was mesmerizing and soothing, and that's probably overly dramatic, but it just, something about it just spoke to me, and I just fell in love with it. And I don't know at what point I bought I got the DVD on Amazon. I can't remember, but I
Mm-hmm.
bought a pretty cheap print of the DVD and rewatched it a couple times, and yeah, it just stuck with me, man. It just stuck. And I'll give a shout out to our friend Sailor right now because he actually sent me his Criterion copy of the movie. So I don't have the crappy DVD version anymore.
Oh,
I've got his
sweet.
Criterion copy that he sent me, and so thanks, Sailor.
Thanks, Sailor. Gotta love
Good dude.
Sailor.
Good dude, that
That,
Sailor.
so before you had taken this Russian sci-fi class, you weren't familiar with, Tarkovsky and any of his works or anything like that, I'm assuming. And so, but I guess,
I'd seen some of Solaris, but
okay.
Solaris, whatever. I don't know if I'd seen the whole movie, but I knew who he was, but I wasn't. I wasn't well versed, and I'm still not.
Were you already a cinephile, would you say, at this point? Were you like a big movie guy, film fan at this point in your life when you had watched the movie? And like, do you think that this sort of opened up a new door, or do you feel like you were still maybe a little fresh in your, cinephile career, and this kind of like launched it? Where in that timeline does Stalker fall?
No, I was already a big movie fan. We weren't operating the site yet, so yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe a little relevant background. I'm a little older. I know I'm older than you, but this wasn't like I went to college in the 90s. I went to college for a little while, but then I finished up my degree in 2014. So I took this class somewhere around 2012.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, I was already a pretty big film fan. We weren't running the site yet, but I think I already
Hmm.
knew most of these guys. And yeah, I'm hesitant to use any like fancy terms because I'm not like some film genie or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I had a probably more deeper interest in movies than the average person. So, and maybe that's why I was more receptive to Stalker than,
Yeah.
maybe, just Joe Q moviegoer.
I feel like you sort of need to be at a certain level in your awareness of film before diving into this movie. That kind of sounds a bit condescending to like the average film fan, but I do think that there is something to what you're saying in terms of having some sort of base level of film fandom before diving into something like this, just because it is such a heavy movie. Unless you're someone who, and I'm sure there are people like this out there, someone who's just like really deep into philosophy and things like that and can watch this without much other sort of like film references in their head and can just like sit with this and like it totally clicks for them. I know for me, if I had watched this when I was like 17 or something, this would not have been a movie that clicked. Like I needed to be a 30-year-old person to sort of appreciate it in any sort of meaningful way.
Yeah, same here.
So at least for me personally, like I feel like I'm grateful that I watched this for the first time when I did.
Yeah, I
guess
agree
just
100%.
For a bit of background, I probably saw this for the first time maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. Very, very, very recent. I, felt like I was in a place where I was trying to expand my sort of film knowledge, my film awareness. I felt that I had seen a lot of the American movies that I sort of needed to see to start to understand some different like things that were happening around the world at different times in like movie making history, including, what Tarkovsky was doing in 1970s, Soviet Union. And again, like I said before, I'm very grateful that I waited until the time that I did to watch this for the first time, because I otherwise would have walked away from this movie like that was super boring and I don't get it. And, the plot didn't make any sense and the characters were all lame and not cool. And there were zero explosions and I hate it, like it's not quotable. It's not Goodfellas or Pulp Fiction. And I don't like that. If I had seen it when I was 17, that would have been my takeaway, as opposed to, stepping away from it now in my life where I'm thinking about like, what does this mean for like my place in the world and like, how we all connect to, the society at large or like the world at large or like our place in the universe, and like not to get too into it, but I think that there is something to all of that. So quit my rambling. And I think before we get into any more of the movie, just in case there's anyone listening who maybe hasn't seen Stalker and is just here because they're kind of curious, do you want to give like a quick overview of like what this movie is about before we start getting into any of the sort of deeper stuff that's going on here?
Yeah. Let me just add to what you were saying, though. I agree. I think you either, I think for most of us, we probably need to be a little bit more mature to get anything out of this movie. At the very least, I think bare minimum, you need to be a kind of person that is open-minded. So, like my dad, I know I probably reference my dad in every one of these podcasts, but he's a big reason why I'm such a big film fan, and I don't think my dad would ever claim to be some sophisticated cinephile, although he's seen way more movies than I have. But he's the kind of person that would be open enough to watch a movie like this. And I mean, he lives in a rural area. He's blue collar guy. He's kind of if you talk to him face to face, you'd be like, really, this guy would watch Stalker? But he would. And I think that even if you're not a cinephile, even if you're not, a professor of philosophy, you just need to have a little bit of an open mind to, try something new. So
for sure.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I wouldn't have gotten anything out of it at 17. I probably would have just been, I was a goofball. So
not to say there aren't 17-year-olds out there
who
can watch this movie and, sit with it in a responsible sort of way, probably even more responsible than like I currently would sit with it, So I'm just saying that me at that age, like I would not have been a candidate for this kind of a movie.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, there's definitely guys and gals out there at that young of an age that can probably process more of it than I can at my age. So totally agree. Yeah, Stalker, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's based on a book. It is, so they have a similar, I don't know, like they're more or less about the same thing, but the plots are pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
So Stalker is, it takes place in a reality where aliens have visited, and I don't think they're ever that specific in the movie, but there is a zone in this world that is off limits, and the military keeps its borders, and you can't go in there. You get arrested, you go to prison. But inside that zone, there is a room that supposedly grants you your wishes, and the title derives its name from the main character. Basically, Stalker is a type of person, I guess, or a job for a person that takes others into the zone and navigates the zone. The zone is dangerous. There's not booby traps, but like there's hazards, right? There's hazards, and if you're a stalker for whatever reason, it's never explained to us. Stalkers have some inner knowledge of like how to avoid these hazards, and they bring these people in. And I don't know if, like I said, it never says if they all want to go to the room or if they just want to go be tourists in the zone. But in the film, our stalker is taking two other guys into the zone, the writer and the professor, and they each have their own motives for wanting to go into the room. And most of the movie just follows them trekking in there and navigating these hazards, which are never explicit. And that kind of goes back to something you were saying earlier. I feel like the book is a little bit more, it feels a little more genre, like it plays up to the sci-fi genre. It seems like it's a little more interested in tropes. Stalker, I don't know. I wonder if you showed this movie to someone and didn't tell them that it was supposed to be, sci-fi adjacent or whatever, if that would even come across, because it's not overt at all.
No, yeah.
That was probably the worst synopsis anyone has ever given of a movie, but I mean the
plot.
The plot is pretty straightforward. A stalker takes a couple of other guys into the zone. They're trying to get to this room that is supposed to fulfill whatever wish or desire you have, and then sort of, I was going to say hijinks ensue, but not really. It's not the kind of movie it is.
Yeah, I think in your write up on Screenage Wasteland on the website for this Canon entry, I think you started it out by saying a stalker, a professor, and a writer walk into a bar, and you're like, I know that sounds like a setup for a joke, but it's actually just the setup for this movie, and there are no jokes that come after that. It's
wow, that sounds way more clever than something I would write. So I'm actually kind of I'm kind of proud of that. I need to go back and reread that. I don't even remember writing that.
No, that's
I had
that's in there.
ChatGPT did that.
Yeah. It does kind of sound like, in another world, or if this movie were made today, it probably there would be hijinks that ensue. It would be kind of funny, a funny little trek into the zone, but instead it is this wildly thoughtful, difficult movie about these three guys as they venture into the zone. And, I guess we'll go into a little bit of spoilers, but they never, like, they don't even end up going to the room, right? Like, no wishes get fulfilled. We just follow them around for, 2.5 hours as they navigate the zone and like talk about life.
Yeah. Wax philosophic, and you spend this, like you said, 2.5 hours or whatever it is, just not really understanding what they're saying and just trying to wrap your brain around what exactly it is that this movie is trying to do. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that. Do you mind if I quote you?
Go for it.
You mentioned earlier. You said, "I don't feel like I'm smart enough to understand this movie," and I kind of laughed because I don't either. Just because I love it doesn't mean I'm smart enough to understand it. I think one of the reasons why I love it is because I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's people out there that can get a really good handle on, the themes or the hidden meanings or whatever. Personally, I don't think there is a meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that I love about the movie, that you can watch it multiple times and you can come away just as perplexed, but just as, I don't know what the word is, like inspired.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't always love movies that are super challenging and vague, but I do appreciate movies that make me, like 3 days later, a week, a month, 6 months later, a year, still going like, wow, that movie, what was that? And even if I'm not smart enough to understand exactly what Tarkovsky is trying to say or do,
Mm-hmm.
it got me thinking. It got me thinking. It kind of turned me inside out and just keeps me mulling it over. And I don't know. I think there's something special about that. I think that takes a special talent.
I love that. I love movies like you're saying that make you feel that way, that sort of sit with you in that way, and it's not so much, what is the meaning of this, but for a movie like this, I think it's more so like, what is my, when I say my, I think each individual viewer, like, what is my reading of this? What am I taking away from this movie? And what I take away from the movie, I don't think that needs to be the same thing that everyone else takes away from the movie. And I think movies like that are really cool, really important. These are the movies that after you watch it with, you know, a class full of people afterwards, you get to sit around and talk about it. Or if you see it with your buddies, you get to, talk about it over dinner or drinks or whatever, and talk through just like sort of different things that each individual was picking up that maybe other individuals weren't picking up. And you get to talk about how it connects to you versus the next person versus the next person. And we spoke about this last week with Sailor about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but I think that it applies more to Stalker. This is a movie you can sit 5 people down and have them all watch the same screening of it together, and you're going to have 5 completely different readings of what the movie is about. And I don't necessarily think that we can say that any of those 5 readings are right or wrong. And like you're saying, that's a really hard thing to do, and it's a really beautiful thing to do. And movies like that are super, super important, and not only for people to be making, but for people to be watching. I wanted to pull something else your from your write up for this movie on the Canon, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here. I didn't pull the actual quote, but you said something along the lines of, "It's not so much what you think about this movie, it's how you feel about it." And I think that that's like the right thing to take away from this movie. It's not a puzzle to solve that has a right answer. It's not. I can't even think of an example. I want to say it's not, Inception, where we need to debate
Mhm.
the rightness or wrongness of like whether or
Yeah.
not the thing was going to drop at the end. It's just how you feel walking away from this movie, how it moves you, how it inspires you to maybe live your life in a bit of a better way than the way that you were living it when you first came into the movie. I just love. I wish I quoted the actual line that you wrote, but I thought that was such a great way to sum up this movie.
I think I would still agree with that. Yeah, whatever I wrote. It's certainly the case that the first time I saw it, whatever I experienced right after, whatever it was feeling. It wasn't so much in my head, because just to go back to what we were saying a minute ago, I didn't have any revelations. I wasn't like, oh, see, Tarkovsky is talking about the postmodern condition of human beings, and I didn't have any of that. I just was kind of in awe.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Stalker is like seeing. This is an odd comparison to make, probably because the movie is so dreary, but it's kind of like seeing a sunset that you can just really appreciate. Like, you don't really have to. You don't need a
Mm-hmm.
picture. You don't need to explain it to anyone standing around you. It's just a feeling that you have, and Stalker's kind of like that. It's like something to just be in awe of for me. I don't need to puzzle it out. And I mean, to be fair, I don't think that's what he was trying to do. I don't think that Tarkovsky was trying to lay a puzzle before us
Mm-hmm.
to solve. And again, if he did, I'm not smart enough to figure out what it was. But I do think that people who are well versed in culture and classics and
Mm-hmm.
art might get a little bit more out of it than someone who's not versed in those things at all. And so I don't know where I fall on that spectrum. I'm certainly not the most learned person when it comes to art and classics
Same.
and culture. But I get that there's something deeper, going on. And I think one of the cool things about it is even if you aren't, like, even if your understanding of art and culture isn't, to the max, there's something there for you to discover. Like, maybe you read something at some point and it makes something click and you go, oh, that was being referenced in the movie. Let me go back and watch it and see if I can and pick at that
Yeah.
and figure a little bit more out about it. So yeah.
It's also like a really hard movie as an American, as like modern American audience members to connect with, because the sensibilities of it are so of a time and place that is, at least for me, like something that is super foreign. Like, I don't have a lot of knowledge about Russian art, Russian history, what was happening specifically in Russia at the time that this was made, or like the sort of Eastern European artworks and uh, just sort of like thought movements that are being referenced here. Like, those are things that are so out of my like realm of knowledge that it is, like you said, there are so many things that I'm missing here, but you still watch it and you're in awe of it because it is such a well-made movie. And because of how well made it is, even if you're missing all of those references and whatnot, you can still just pick up on the fact that, oh, this is like a director and these are artists who are really, really good at what they do. And I can at least recognize that if I don't recognize anything else that's going on in this movie.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about what like concrete things we have taken from it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
You,
So personally, one of the things that I've thought about over the years since seeing this movie, and again, like you say, I don't know if this was intended or not, but it's something that jumped out at me. It's how I read parts of it anyway. You have this contrast of the zone versus, I'm just going to call it, Stalker's world.
mm-hmm,
And one is very Edenic, the zone,
mm-hmm,
um, and one is very dystopian, which is Stalker's world. And you start in the Stalker's world, and it's just everything is sepia toned, and
mm-hmm.
they live in the shadow of this. I don't even know what it is. Is it a fact? It's not a factory, right? It's like a power plant or something,
Yeah,
and everything is dreary and gray. And then they go into the zone, and it's like a natural paradise, aside from the fact that it's supposed to be dangerous. And
yeah,
so it made me wonder if maybe Tarkovsky was trying to say something about the industrialization of the world and like our march toward progress and
Mhm.
search for more and more and happiness or progress or whatever you want to call it. And that, to me, like that sort of parallels these three guys search for something more, something better, go into the room and have your wishes fulfilled. But meanwhile, they're walking past all this natural beauty and they're completely missing it. I mean, like
Yeah.
this world is is obviously better than the one they left behind. So I don't know. And there's some weird, like, I don't know. I can't, again, I don't want to keep saying this, but I don't feel smart enough to really puzzle out what's taking place here. But the zone is supposed to be dangerous and littered with these hazards, and at least in the book, there's a sense that there's some leftover, like, poisonous material or radiation or something like that. So the
Mhm.
environment might be poisoned, but the world they just left is literally polluted. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
obviously polluted. So you have this weird sort of dichotomy. So yeah, that's probably one of the bigger things that jumped out to me, that was like a reading for me after I'd seen it, and that was only after I'd seen it 2 or 3 times. What about you?
Sweet. I've never had that reading. And I've only seen this once. So,
Hmm.
there's only really been, and saw it once and then been thinking about it a lot for this episode. But yeah, I've never thought about that, but I do really like that idea of, sort of the post-industrial world and our search and quest for for, more and more, and passing up all of this natural beauty that's around us in order to get to the next thing, and being so blind to it.
And if you look around in some of those scenes, there's, like, it's clear that nature is reclaiming what man has made. So, like, all any man-made work within the zone is overgrown. It's
Mhm.
there's stuff in the river that clearly was like, it's evidence of a civilization that's being reclaimed by nature. So I don't know, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah. I really like that. I feel like for me, most of my reading was focused more so on the characters, and there's there are a lot of religious references within this movie. The Stalker is in many ways sort of like a spiritual guide for the professor and the writer.
Hmm.
I think it's worth mentioning that the professor is a professor of science, so I think the struggle between art and science is very much so at play here. That was my big takeaway. You know, I was, as opposed to reading it as like a societal sort of commentary on art and science and religion, I was reading it as like every person's individual struggle and like grappling with those things. And to me, their venture into the zone and into the room was a venture inward, like into oneself. And for me, I think that there are bits of the scientist, there are bits of the artist, but also bits of the stalker, of like the spiritual guide. And that spiritual guide is like trying to grapple with the need for science in the world and like math and all that good stuff, but also for art, creativity, music, painting, all of that stuff, and trying to find like the balance between those two, and going deeper and deeper into the zone, into ourselves, our minds, our bodies, our spirits, all that good stuff, and trying to figure out like what is it exactly that we want when we reach those innermost depths. Again, I don't think that is necessarily what Tarkovsky was like trying to say. That was just how I viewed the movie, and a lot of that is based on just like where I was personally in my life when I was watching it. the other things that I was, watching, reading, listening to at that particular time that sort of like influenced that reading. But yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
Well,
If
no,
you sound like a total kook or what.
no. I think you're onto something because well, we'd be foolish to not mention communism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this was the Soviet Union. He was making this film when the Soviet Union was still a thing, and the Soviets were preoccupied with I think they called it the new man. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the term. I'm probably getting this wrong, but yeah, I feel like there was just definitely this idea that you could create, a utopia and better living through science, and hell, I mean that even applies to the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
And art was having to operate within certain confines. Oddly enough, they produced some of the best art that the world has ever seen in the modern
Yeah.
era. But yeah, I think you're onto something with that, man. There's something there. And again, I don't know if I'm smart enough to tug it out of there, but I think you got something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also kind of ties back to what you were saying with the like the industrial sort of real world or Stalker's world that we see at the beginning versus the and it's not like that colorful or like overly saturated or like super green and natural. It doesn't hit you in the face, but there is a very clear natural element to what's going on in the zone and like that struggle between, science and advancement and all of that stuff, as well as connecting with like our natural world and, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, it's very quiet there. I think at one point there's a scene where they're walking through a field. Maybe it's the scene where he's throwing the little nuts that are bound up. So like
Mm-hmm.
little metal nuts that he ties to bits of cloth, and then he throws them to see if that area is clear of hazards or traps or whatever. Maybe it's that scene, but they're walking through this field, and there's kind of those bits of cottony material floating through the air. Like it gives you the sense that it's probably summer, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe early summer, late spring. It's
Mm-hmm.
quiet, and then if you contrast that against how the movie opens with basically Stalker being awakened by a train rattling his house, and then you see is it at the beginning of the I think you see it at the beginning and the end. You see this
Mm-hmm.
um, nuclear power plant, or whatever it is. It's just like gushing smoke into the air. It's a noisy, polluted, ugly world versus this basically this world that's being reclaimed by nature, and there's
Yeah.
definitely evidence of man, but it's in the process of going away.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That's really interesting for me. I don't know if you feel this as much, but like for me, living in New York City, where, you know, I go outside and my entire world is essentially the Stalker's version of reality. But then, every now and then when I get out of the city and, I get a weekend either in upstate New York or something like that, and I'm surrounded by nature and there are trees and there's grass and flowers and, and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, like this stuff is all so great. And then I, go back home to New York and it's just like, it's this polluted, not that I think New York is a shithole, but like it's just polluted. It's just polluted, concrete,
Yeah.
just shit. And it's amazing, but like there's nothing natural about it. There's like one tree, like on my entire block. But I go back, I leave the city and I see the natural world, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cool. So like, I know that the movie is definitely approaching that from a 1970s Soviet perspective, but like it definitely applies to, modern stateside audiences too.
Yeah, I think it applies to any urbanite. My wife always likes to tease me about the fact that whenever we go to New York City, I have to spend like a good chunk of one day in Central Park. just wandering, and like I somehow think I'm going to get to the end every time I'm there, but I've probably seen like a 16th of it, or I mean, less than that, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I get that. I mean, I live in I get really great sunsets where I live. I happen to live on a street that has no obstructions toward the west. But I mean, I haven't seen the stars in years. I mean, there's so much light pollution. My kiddo doesn't even know what a star is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty sad. I guess I'm a little, our situations aren't quite the same. Even though I live in an urban area, it's nothing like New
Hmm.
York City. So I'm looking at grass right now and trees and stuff. But yeah, I think we all feel that in one way or another, unless you're living in Alaska or Montana or something like that.
Yeah. I saw something that, this is a reading that I don't necessarily agree with, but I could see where someone like gets to this point. Again, hammering home the fact that there because this movie is so rich and layered, there are all these different takeaways that one can have. So talking about the sort of Soviet aspect of all of it, one of the readings that I saw was that the sepia world, the sort of real world that Stalker lives in, that just represents living under a communist regime, and going into the zone represents this like utopian version of what the West is or like could be. I personally wasn't I didn't totally buy into that reading, but I guess I kind of get it, especially when you consider sort of where Tarkovsky was at this point in his relationship to Soviet Russia, and sort of how the rest of his life played out, where he ends up exiling himself and like going to the West and carries out the rest of his career and life in the West. I don't know if he actually thought the zone was some sort of version of his utopian vision of the West. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, if you were picking up on that kind of reading at all, or what.
I mean, the first time I saw it, I thought there was definitely some stuff in there about like Tarkovsky's current state of, like the state of the Russia that he lived in.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I sometimes think that in the West we overstate these kind of things just because of our relationship to them, our relationship to them, during the Cold War, how we feel about communism. And I mean, I'm no fan, but I don't know how he felt about it. I don't know what
Hmm.
Tarkovsky was saying in any of his art about the political setup there in Russia at the time, or the Soviet bloc. But that's just, I don't know. That's a little on the nose for me.
Yeah.
If that's what it is, that's fine. I don't have any issue with someone coming up with that reading, but I think it might be a little bit black and white, a little simple. But yeah, I mean, maybe you have some. I think I used to know a little more about Tarkovsky's biography, but was he like overtly in opposition to the Communist Party, or was there what was
I,
the reason that he was exiled?
I don't think so. I think he left. I think it was his decision to leave. Like you said before, making movies under the Soviet regime was a little difficult. A lot of filmmakers ended up leaving, but also a lot of really good art was made under that regime. I think it's kind of like the Hitchcock thing, where some of the best art is made when there's like friction between artist and whoever is like controlling the production of said art. So
Absolutely,
again, like it in Soviet Russia, like you get movies like Stalker. You get a lot of, even like what we were talking about last week with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Like Milos Forman spent the early part of his career making really interesting movies under you know Soviet supervision. Even something like one of my favorite movies, Come and See, is still technically made within Soviet Russia. Like a lot of really interesting things were happening. I just think that, I think Tarkovsky just sort of bumped up against the sort of restrictions that were put in place by, the movie producing arm of the government,
Yeah.
which is understandable. Like that's going to happen in, like I said, in every situation, whether it's a Soviet regime or the producers at Paramount, you know, but I think after Stalker, he had just had enough and he decided to leave. And I think his last 2 or 3 movies were made in the West. So one was made in Italy, and I think his last one was made in Switzerland. But I do think that this is an interesting time for us to sort of talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff with Stalker, which I think are as interesting as everything that is actually on the film that we or within the film that we actually watch. So I'm pretty sure you wrote about this, and I'm sure you have background about sort of what happened to Tarkovsky after the shooting of this movie, or maybe we want to talk about like the production stuff, like all the pre-production mishaps that happened with this movie. Why don't we start there? So, what do you have for us in terms of that, like the extensive shooting and just like pre-production hell that this movie was in?
So they had to reshoot it. Wasn't he like super dejected and almost didn't want to do it? Didn't
Yeah,
want to reshoot it. And did they? Okay, so did they change the director of photography for it?
they did. Yeah, the
Okay,
original was fired because I guess the original printing was just like kind of fucked, and and they couldn't use it to make the movie or to like produce the movie the way that they wanted to.
right. And wasn't there? Okay, I think there was something. I think people had seen some of the original cut and said that it was even more like astonishingly beautiful than the actual version of Stalker that we got. So now
Hmm.
there's this hanging question of was there was there this other masterpiece that that was like a totally different
Yeah,
version of this film that just got like nature just said, yeah, no,
yeah.
no, you're not getting that one.
Like we could have gotten 2 masterpieces, and
Yeah,
now we just have the one.
isn't that wild?
Yeah,
Yeah, and then yeah, I want to say didn't I think a lot of people got sick on the production because they shot near a was it a wastewater treatment plant or not a wastewater? No, it's like
yeah.
a paper
That's like
plant
the
or something.
big legend. So they shot it in Estonia, and it was near. I think you said like a wastewater plant, and they were shooting near there. And the theory is that like the water was like super super contaminated, and a bunch of people. So like I think one of the co-writers, one of the actors, Tarkovsky, and his wife all ended up getting cancer within the next 10 years after the movie was made.
Yeah,
And
that's
many
right.
people think that it's due to the fact that they were exposing themselves to those like toxic chemicals for, you know, two two reshoots of this movie.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I remember I think I put this in the write up, but I think there's a scene where there's something falling from the sky that looks like snow, but they obviously shot it in summer. So
Yeah.
is that some kind of chemical byproduct that's falling out of the sky? And then there's foam in the river. So
And that's all.
some of
Yeah.
this stuff is kind of shooting the hell out of my theory that the zone is Edenic. But I do think there's definitely some of that for sure. I mean, I do remember these parts along the river where there's obvious like the river's obviously polluted with remnants of mankind's civilization that's being reclaimed. But yeah, I still think like the whole thing is just gradually being reclaimed by nature. But yeah, and I think there were people that died after the movie was shot. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, that's wild, man. I think the thing that's the most bizarre to me is that the movie was reshot and he still like I keep saying he, even though films are a product of lots of people, but
Hmm.
he and the crew managed to pull off this movie despite the fact that that's like oh man, that's like thinking that some of Shakespeare's works, like he spilled some beer on one and was like,
Yeah.
oh bloody hell, I've got to rewrite this entire thing. I guess I'll just half-ass it now.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then we get
you
Hamlet. Yeah.
it's just that's Shakespeare, like half drunk, just like, oh,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. He just farts out a second version of Macbeth, and it's like
Right.
the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely insane. And I think there was like the original printing of Stalker still available until like the mid 80s, and then someone just like burned it. And so there's like now no trace of that original version whatsoever. It would be cool if it didn't end up getting burned, and
Yeah. I think it was a
as part of
fire.
like, oh, just like a random fire.
Yeah,
That
I don't think it was burned on purpose. I think it was a fire.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I don't recall what the specifics were. And again, I remember when I was doing research on this. Now some of this is coming back to me, but not everything was real specific. Like details weren't super clear. So I think even I don't think it's even clear what kind of plant it was that they shot near. I think it was.
Mhm.
Some people said it was a paper plant. Some people said it was some sort of chemical plant, but it wasn't clear. But yeah, I don't think it was like they just like torched it because this is crap, let's torch it.
So it was like
Yeah,
it was an accident.
I believe so. Yeah, yeah,
That sucks. It just would have been cool for, the 40th anniversary or whatever if someone was able to restore that version, and, you know, movie fans across the globe got to see the alternate version of Stalker. And, then we could all have the debate of which is the definitive version, which one is better. The Criterion Blu-ray would come with both versions, all that good stuff.
Well, there is a part in Stalker where I think it's the Stalker that's talking about how, maybe it's the professor, I can't remember, but he's saying, if you go into the room, it'll give you what you want, but you can't really ever know if what you want is what you really want. You can't really know
Mhm.
if what you don't want is what you don't really want. So maybe that was nature's little joke on Tarkovsky, like, you think you want this version, but
But
maybe it's not really what you want. Maybe
yeah,
what you really want is to reshoot the whole thing.
yeah. And, nature then went the extra step of going, you don't want this other version out there so much that we're going to lose it in a fire.
Right.
Yeah. But just, it's like you hear about production hell, but I don't know if any story tops this movie being shot. I guess it was edited and printed, being that far along in the process, and then say, nope, we're scrapping it and we're starting all over again. Like that's just another level of production hell.
Well, it sounds to me like Disney is just maybe trying to make their own Stalker, because don't they just like reshoot movies all the time now? And
Oh yeah.
Disney, Lucasfilm.
Yeah, I don't think
Too soon.
Lucasfilm and any of their recent Star Wars output, I don't know if that's necessarily ever going to touch the the level of what Stalker is.
Yeah, they're close, but they got a little bit of work to do still.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that I can think of that would come close would be Apocalypse Now, and just the hell
Hmm.
that he went through, like the personal hell that he went through to get that made. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then what was it? Was it the Twilight Zone movie where they crashed a helicopter with some kids in it or something and like killed the kids? And
Oh yeah.
there's
Twilight. I feel
definitely
like the Twilight Zone movie and Poltergeist were like notoriously cursed sets.
yeah. So there's definitely been some really wild things that have happened with movie productions, but I don't know, man. I can't even imagine having to completely. Well, I've had to do it in my own personal life, but it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, we've all had to re-record a few podcast episodes, but
Yeah.
that's nothing like. And then, I mean, I think the other thing about, it's obviously not confirmed, but the sort of the theory that Tarkovsky essentially gave his life for this movie, and the cancer that ended up killing him was because of the extended shoots that they did on this, is just, it's so like brutally sad.
Mm-hmm.
As an artist, you always want to create a masterpiece and give the world something beautiful, and I'm sure most artists would say, like, yeah, they'd give their life to create something that can be considered a masterpiece by most. But it is like insanely tragic to think that the exposure to the elements may have killed him, and so many other people who were involved in this movie. Like, it's absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I want to say there were several actors, John Wayne being the most famous of them. I think that claimed later in life, or maybe it was relatives of his after his death, that claimed he died of some kind of radiation related cancer from
Mm-hmm.
shooting in some, I forget where it is, but it's somewhere. I think it was stateside. Yeah, it had to be stateside, but it was somewhere like not far from where they were doing nuclear missile
Yeah,
testing and stuff. You heard about that?
I haven't heard about that. I was thinking of the original Marble Man, who, I guess there were a few, right, who died of lung cancer because they were shooting so many commercials of them smoking cigs, and like that's
I've
a
never heard
more
that.
that's a more direct sort of causation of death
Oh
than what
wow.
we're talking about here, but still, like, absolutely insane, and just like brutal to think about.
Yeah, that's given a lot for art, man. I'm
Yeah,
good. I think I'm
I
good.
don't know how we transition away from this.
Well, hey, oh no, I don't have a good transition away from it. What else did you want to talk about?
The only other thing that I wanted to talk about, so we've talked a lot about how this is like a pretty hard movie to watch, and it's a hard movie to get into. It's a tall ask of audience members, and I think part of that is the way that it's edited. And I don't want to get too much into this because I feel like at times I can be an editing nerd, and it's not the best look for me. But I was, in my research about this movie, I read that the average modern film has a cut every 4 to 6 seconds. Makes sense, especially if we're talking about like action movies. There's just a lot of cutting and splicing together. Most shots aren't on the screen for that long of a period of time. The average time between cuts in Stalker is 1 minute and 8 seconds.
So that right there is one of the reasons why, probably at least some small part of why I love it. Yeah, I hate that about modern movies. Hate's a strong word. I
Mm-hmm.
dislike that most of the time. I think it's probably appropriate and great in certain things. I don't
Mm-hmm.
love that that's become the norm. Man, I watched something recently that I remember thinking, man, this like took its time in certain places, and I was surprised by that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't have those facts, but that's one of the things I don't like about modern cinema is this idea that we have to rush from thing to thing. Not only rush from scene to scene, but rush from image to image, and that we constantly have to have something to keep our attention. I think that hurts the movies. I think it hurts the stories themselves. And not to get too in the weeds, but I think that hurts character development. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you go back and you look at older movies, it's almost jarring how not in a hurry they are, and you
Mm-hmm.
get these moments between characters that like the only reason for them really is to just give you a sense of who these people are. And it's like with the modern movies that we have, especially the big genre movies, it's these movies aren't about people anymore. And that's why I don't think they make that much of an impact. It'd be ridiculous to say that superhero movies haven't made a huge impact, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like constantly, a constant urge to go back and rewatch a lot of the big blockbusters that have come out within the last 15, 20 years. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that we don't really get to know the characters. Like, we don't have enough time to hear a conversation between two characters that isn't like immediately like relevant to getting from here to the next explosion.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that about, like I said, I've noticed that about older movies. I remember a few years back, I watched this movie that that probably would have been considered an action movie at the time. I think it's called The Killer Elite.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm struggling to remember who all was in that, but golly, what's the main the main male actor of Misery?
Oh, I'm totally blanking.
I know. Sorry, audience. Anyway,
Yeah, there's so many people furiously yelling at their
it's
devices right now. It's this guy.
Yeah.
How do you not know that?
Yeah, he's I mean, he's a fantastic actor, but yeah, there's if you watch this movie, it's got several big actors in it, but it's slow. Like, there's slow moments, and there's these moments where the actors are they're just chatting, and you're like, whoa, they're just chilling. If you made this movie today, it would just be boom, 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 just like, okay, no time to talk. Let's go. Let's get to the next action scene.
Yeah. So much of this movie is just these three guys just talking about philosophy and the world and art and science and life and politics and just like, but then with that, it's these extended scenes of them talking, but also the shots linger.
Right.
It's really allowing the actors to go through their lines. It's allowing the camera to pick up their facial expressions. It's allowing the camera to pick up what's going on in the background. Like, all of that stuff is important. All of that stuff adds to our understanding of movies. It's I think fast editing in many places is worthwhile. I think when you're doing a standard conversation, like reverse shot, over the shoulder sort of editing, and you switch back and forth when each character's talking, like that's totally cool. But also, like, we should allow ourselves for like things to linger, whether it be a shot, a scene, a moment, all of that stuff, a look from a character's face. You let those things linger, and then a lot of the times, like, those are the moments that sit with you the longest, that sit with audience members the longest, that people come back to constantly and ponder over and over and over again. And because this movie is so deliberate in how it does all of that, it definitely sits with audience members.
Yeah. You know whose movies are like this, but I just do not like, they just have never resonated with me, is Terrence Malick. We saw Tree of Life at the movies, and oh my gosh, dude.
Walked out.
So, no, we stayed for the whole movie, but this is why I don't believe in this snobbery of, oh, well, you don't like Stalker. Well, you just must not love movies. I mean, dude, some things just don't resonate with us. And the only Terrence Malick movie that's resonated with me was Badlands, and there was just more narrative in that movie than some of his later movies. Tree Life didn't work for me. There was another one that came after that I saw that didn't work for me either.
It's so funny. Sailor and I think we've talked about it a few times on the show, but I think Sailor is also not a big Terrence Malick guy, and I quite enjoyed Tree of Life, Badlands, Days of Heaven, The New World, Thin Red Line. I think those are the five that I'm into, and I haven't seen much of the rest. And Sailor is just like, he thinks I'm the craziest person in the world for liking that. But it's totally a valid point. Like, if someone listens to this episode, they hear us go on and gush about how much we love Stalker, and then they go and check it out, and it's not for them, it doesn't click for them, that doesn't mean that they're any less of a film fan. Like,
100%.
different movies click for different people in different ways. Like, I'm sure that there are people who, for them, Stalker is their favorite movie, and it totally changed their life. And it's not that for me, but I will never want to take that away from that person. And on the flip side of that, there are people who watch Stalker and they're like, it did nothing for me. And that's also super valid. And I totally respect, no matter where it is that you fall on that spectrum in regards to this movie, or really any movie for that matter. Like, there are a lot of different factors that go into what clicks with us and what doesn't. And, it's that's why art is cool.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, if Sailor had been on this episode, he would have. I mean, he wouldn't have trashed Stalker, but he's not a fan. He just thinks it's plotting and slow and pointless in some places. And maybe I'm putting some words in his mouth that I think he appreciates it.
Mm-hmm. But it's not for him. Yeah,
it's not
his movie. Yeah.
So Sailor does not like boring, and I can respect that. Yeah. And I think our what we think is boring differs from person to person. And like you said, you found something in Tree of Life. That's fantastic. I just didn't.
Yeah.
And there are other movies like that. What's the movie? I think it's a Nicholas Winding Refn movie. It's the one where
is it not Drive? Drive is the big one.
No, that one's more of a straightforward narrative. I'm talking about the one where the Viking gets lost in the Americas.
Oh,
dang it!
I've never seen that one. I've only seen Drive and Only God Forgives, and I got to tell you, Only God Forgives did not do it for me. But I know that there are people out there who are 1,000% on board with it, and again, that's why art is cool. That's why movies are cool.
I've heard that about Only God Forgives, and I've put it off for that reason. I've also heard divisive things about Neon Demon.
Yeah.
The movie I'm thinking of is called Valhalla Rising, and it's got dude, I'm not doing great with the names tonight. I'm usually pretty good with this kind of stuff. Mads Mikkelsen, he's the star. And it's real similar to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies you watch it and you're like, what the hell did I just put myself through? And what does this even mean? And was there a point to this? But it's a movie that I don't regret seeing for sure. And that's how I feel about Stalker. I don't regret seeing Tree of Life. I don't regret seeing Titane. In fact, I feel like my movie appreciation was only enriched for seeing them. It just, I don't know that I'll ever go back and rewatch Titane, but it challenged me for sure.
Yeah. You should watch Raw by the same director.
Eddie Murphy? I love Eddie Murphy Raw. That's fantastic.
But yeah, back to Stalker. I think I don't know if you had anything else on Stalker. I think I've gone through everything that I wanted to mention about the movie. Do you have anything else?
I think you about covered it. We didn't talk about really any technical aspects of the movie, and I'm not great about that. I'm not a filmmaker. I didn't go to film school. I am not an expert. But I think you watch this movie, you realize that the cinematographer knew what he was doing. He or she, I think it was a guy. He knew what he was doing. These actors, even though they're speaking in a language I don't understand, they are just killing it. They don't have a ton of dialogue to work with, so they're having to express themselves with their bodies, with their expressions. It's beautifully shot. It's just a well-crafted movie in all aspects. And I think even if you don't love it and it doesn't speak to you, I think you can appreciate that it's a well-made movie. So I can't offer a whole lot more in terms of like technical aspects of the movie. That's just not my expertise. But But
I think that's a bare minimum. You know, even if you don't love it, it's a pretty easy movie to sort of appreciate from afar. Definitely on a technical level. Yeah, I don't have much on the technical front.
I
You know, I don't know how the camera work or anything like that is like enriching what Tarkovsky's major thesis, or I don't, what's the plural of thesis?
I don't
Theses?
know. Yeah, maybe. I don't
I'm just
know.
gonna go with that.
DCs?
Yeah,
I don't know.
theses. I
I
don't
have no
know.
clue.
But yeah, I don't know how the camera work or anything like that is like furthering any thesis that he might have about, you know, how to interpret this movie. I'm sure that there is a ton out there on that stuff. For me, this was more of a movie that I tried to like allow myself to just experience um rather than like try to figure out, which I think goes back to, you know, what you said in your Canon piece about it. And I think that was a big thing for me for like when I first watched this movie is I was finally getting to a place in my movie watching where I stopped trying to outsmart movies. I stopped trying to, you know, just figure out what they're about and pick out the plot point, or the plot holes and all that stuff. You know, that's a really, to me, that's a really lame way to watch movies. And I just started
That's
allowing myself to like let the movie take me on whatever journey it is that it wants to take me on, and sort of what I call giving myself over to the movie. And I either click with it or I don't, but I find myself clicking with a lot more things when I just give myself over to the movie and I'm not overly critical, overly analyzing what every little thing is supposed to mean or how it might be the incorrect choice or anything like that. And I feel like with Stalker, like I wasn't really looking for those technical aspects in order to pick it apart or put it together. I was really just like I was just going with the flow, and I loved doing that with this particular movie.
yeah. I think that's one of the downsides I would say of this hobby is that you get so in the weeds on things that you can sometimes spoil the experience of just enjoying the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, what does this mean? What is that? Well, oh, there's some symbolism. Let me file that. Let me file that away. And when I was younger and I was still finishing up my degree, I did some film reviews for a now defunct blog, and I remember that like the first one I did, I took a notepad in with me, and
Hmm.
by the time I went to my second movie screening, I was like, screw this notepad. I'm just gonna, if I don't remember a quote or something,
Yeah.
so be it. I'm not getting the film when I'm sitting here trying to jot stuff down and like write things about certain shots or whatever. And I'll just say this to anybody out there that goes and finds this movie and watches it after listening to this. And like all of you are going to do that, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Thank you.
I would just say, I think there are things in the movie in terms of shot selection, in terms of the way certain shots work that are interesting and intentional. I definitely would go with Raf's recommendation. I wouldn't go into the movie trying to figure it out or let me fixate on this one take and all that nonsense. Like there's stuff in there to appreciate about the way the movie is crafted, but just let it wash over you. Raf, have you ever watched? Have you ever had someone tell you or read an article on Screen Age and it says, "Oh, this movie they were trying to do the longest one take, in history or whatever," and then I think the movie that did this for me, like the big one for me, I think was it 1914. There was
Oh,
like,
the war movie.
yeah, was the whole movie a one take or something? I mean, it was like done
Yeah.
with digital
Yeah.
enhancements or something, but it just screwed the whole movie up for me. And I ended up enjoying the movie, but you're like trying to pick, okay, where, let me get ready
Oh,
for this one take
that's an edit.
shot. and
That's an edit.
and
You know,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
calling out where there's that's a stitch. They stitch
And
that together. Yeah.
I don't think, I don't know. to call attention to something like that, I think just kind of demystifies it or ruins it in some way. And I get that
Yeah.
if you pull something like that off, you feel really good about it. But I don't
I
know.
think
Is
in a
that
lot of ways, watching movies like that is really cynical, and I've tried to get away from cynical movie watching. I think there are still ways to point out, you know, shot selection, and acting choice, all of that stuff in ways that like enhance our viewing of the movies. But I think a lot of times when we're hyper focused on those kinds of things, it just really like detracts from our ability to enjoy movies. And it's, sort of going back to our New Year resolution conversation, it's not necessarily a concrete resolution that I have right now. It's just something that I've tried to like train myself in doing over the years of watching movies, to just not be so cynical when watching them. And it's part of the reason why I like doing this show is, we're all movie fans for a reason. Like, we're movie fans because movies are awesome, and we connect with them, and they speak to us, and they tell us things about ourselves and the world in really cool ways. And we should try to remind ourselves of that as much as possible, whether it be talking about the movies that inspire those feelings, that inspire our fandom, or reminding ourselves of like how to watch movies and be a respectful audience member. So like, I kind of see all of that in this as acting and as part of the same sort of thing. And to bring it back to Stalker, I think that this is one of those movies that both reminds me of like why it's cool to be a movie fan and why it's cool to watch movies in like a respectful way. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all the movies in the canon, but I do want to give a special shout out in this case to Stalker. And
yeah,
Dahl, thank you very much for being on for this episode. I feel like this has been a great conversation.
dude, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I always love your insight and the conversations that we have about these movies. I love having you on for a lot of these more difficult movies, because I feel like you're able to talk about them in cool ways that helps me understand them, and like definitely helps, or I would assume also helps our audience members to sort of think differently about how to think about these movies that we talk about.
Yeah, I think your approach is the right one, man. I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in, oh, I didn't, well, let me go log this on Letterbox, and then, oh, well, I didn't see that. What's wrong with me? I mean, just enjoy the movie, and if you don't, you don't. That's fine.
Yeah,
That's you're you, and that's what makes this great big ball so mystifying, is we're all different.
love it. Sweet. Shall we get into recommendations
Yeah, let's do it.
after all after all this?
Let's do it.
Yes, so we'll do recommendations for Stalker. We'll, same deal as always. We'll each recommend 3 things to check out if someone enjoys Stalker and is maybe interested in checking out some similar things. So we'll each do at least one movie, and then the other 2 things. Doll, as you know, returning listeners, as you know, and new listeners, as you maybe don't know, the other 2 things can also be movies or anything else: books, music, TV shows, anything. The connections to the movie can be as loose or as literal as we like. We like to get weird with it. We like to get creative. With all that being said, Doll, why don't you kick us off? Give us your first recommendation for Stalker.
Okay, I'm going to go with the movie The Quiet Earth. It is a New Zealand production. I think it was shot in and around Auckland. It's from the 80s. Yeah, and oddly enough, I think the main star of it is he looks similar to the writer in Stalker. But yeah, I love recommending this movie. I might have recommended it. Dude, did I recommend it on another episode? I mean, like, I take every opportunity I can.
Yeah, I don't think so, but it does sound familiar.
Well, you know what? If you're listening to this and I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but it's a good movie. It's a small movie. It's a science fiction film. It's one of those great Twilight Zone setups. You wake up and you're the last person on Earth. How did this happen? And then once you get past the shock of it all, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can do anything you want. You can drive cars through the city and crash them into other cars. You can go loot stores and wear any kind of clothes. You can dress up as a woman. You can just go as nuts as you want. And then after you've gotten that out of your system, what do you do? And I'm not going to say a whole lot more about it because I think it will spoil some of the plot points, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a small movie. It is, I think that the way that it's related for me to Stalker, and the reason why I'm recommending it, is because there is an event that happens and it leaves a mark on the world. It's very much a sci-fi genre film, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no, oh, I shouldn't say there's no special effects. The film is largely devoid of any sort of big special effects. That's not the focus of it. The focus of the movie is the character and characters. So, spoiler alert. It's just so good. It's so good. Go see it. Everyone go see it.
Sweet.
Find it somehow. I think
Yeah.
I have a steel book of it that I bought years ago, and I think the first time I saw it, I think my aunt had it. It was in her video store, and I think the cover is really cool. So I think we're like, oh, that's cool. Let's grab that, and then it's just like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is something else.
I love that. Definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely adding that to my list. That sounds pretty rad.
It's great.
I love
What
it.
you
And
got?
I don't think you've recommended that one before.
Okay,
So
well, cool, even better.
all good there. All right, sweet. For my first recommendation, I'm going to go with a pretty obvious choice. I think with everything that we talked about in terms of like the fallout from this movie, the cancer that spread throughout some of the cast and crew, the like where the zone was shot, and just a lot of the imagery of this movie, it's hard to not think about the Chernobyl
Mm.
disaster, even though that didn't happen until a few years after this movie was made. But although I wasn't the biggest fan of the series, I know people really dig the Chernobyl HBO miniseries. I think it's 5 parts. You can burn through it in a weekend. It, I don't know if there's anyone out there who hasn't seen it, but if you haven't, you should check that out. So that's going to be my first recommendation for Stalker.
That's a tough series, man. Great recommendation. Definitely relevant, and we didn't even get
Yeah.
into that. We didn't get into the video game. We didn't get into how the film is kind of like this. It's kind of prescient in what happens with Chernobyl, the correlations
Yeah.
or similarities.
It's eerie.
But
It's like really eerie.
it's pretty weird. But yeah, very good rec for sure. Okay, my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I am going to recommend another movie, and movie is On the Silver Globe.
Oh, that's been on my watch list for a while.
Yeah, dude. Pack a lunch.
Yeah.
So that's a movie. The director is Andrei Zuwowski, I think is how you say the name, Polish director. And I think,
Mhm.
again, I think this was made behind the Iron Curtain. There were issues with the production. I think so. I got to see it at a theater, a screening here. I don't know how long ago it was. I want to say it was less than 10 years ago, but I can't even remember what group it was, but maybe it's Austin Film Society, but they screened it
Mhm.
and got to go see it. They had to reconstruct, I think I say they, whoever put this movie back together for public consumption, it was lost. I want to say the Communist Party had some issue with it or something, and it was censored, and so there were pieces of it that were lost. And I think at the end, there's like, I want to say there was text or something explaining what happens to the rest of it because they didn't have the film. But On the Silver Globe is a hard movie, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's one that I watched and had a reaction to that's probably similar to the one that people have to movies like Stalker. It's similar to my reaction to Tree of Life,
Hmm.
although I think I appreciate it on the Silver Globe more. It's bizarre, dude. It is bizarre. Like, throw in all these weird, like 70s sci-fi elements, like Buck Rogers type, Battlestar Galactica stuff
Yeah.
with Eastern European cultural bits. And I don't even, dude. You want to talk about a movie that makes you just feel stupid? I didn't know what the hell this movie was about, and I still don't. And I've never seen it again, although I definitely would. I would definitely watch it
Hmm.
again. But and I don't know if there's some like direct connection to Tarkovsky or Stalker. But if you look at the poster for this movie, there's a
Hmm.
guy. It's a picture of a guy. It's just like his head, and he's got a crown of thorns. And it's
Yeah.
this. You've seen it,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So if you pull that up and pull up a picture of the writer with the crown of thorns on from the mounds scene in the movie, I think it's the
Hmm.
mounds scene.
Yeah.
It's like it has to be a reference to Stalker. I don't know what the director is trying to say, or if it's a reply to Stalker, or if it's a riff
Hmm.
or a commentary. And the movie is sort of sci-fi and fantasy, and there's like tons of philosophy in there, and it'll definitely make you scratch your head. But it's just this really interesting Soviet artifact, and
Sweet.
I'm
Yeah.
glad
I
I'm glad it's still around.
I've been looking to check that out for a while, so might move it up on the watch list. But
Yeah, if you take it in chunks, don't feel bad
yeah,
because
I
it's a lot.
love a weird out there, just like zany, what the fuck did I just watch kind of movie.
Oh, it's that for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to like find the time where I'm like, okay, I have the time that I need to get zany, get weird, and like just be able to not do anything or anything besides just like sit and think about it after. So
Hmm.
definitely gonna make the time to watch that soon. I love that pick. All right, for my second recommendation, I think I'm gonna do a novel whose movie version I believe has already been recommended, and I'm always really upset when I think about the fact that the movie version isn't in the canon, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm gonna go with another sci-fi story that is about a person who has to guide another person or persons through a fairly treacherous area in order to find some sort of salvation, we'll say, on the other side. It's kind of a loose connection, but I feel like that description can apply to both Stalker and to the novel version of Children of Men by P.D. James. I'm
Mm.
a huge fan of the film, and because of that, I then went and read the book. But for this particular for Stalker, I'm just recommending the novel version.
Did you know I didn't even know that was a book?
I didn't know it was a book either until I was at my parents' house, and I always like to just roam around and see like what kinds of old books they have. And I saw Children of Men on the bookshelf, and I was like, I love this movie. I should read this book. And I did, and the book was cool.
Well, good for your parents, man, for having that on the
Y-
shelf. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Yeah, that's a tough movie, man.
Yeah. I think the
Oof.
movie version is better than the book, but like if you're a fan of reading sci-fi, there's no reason to not check out Children of Men. And like I
Yeah.
know like people like sci-fi fans like love PD James. I haven't read any of her other right her
Oh,
other
I guess.
stuff, but yeah, I know like people love PD James stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, yeah, I've heard of that author, but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if is it a woman?
I think so, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah,
There's probably again there's someone yelling at their device right now.
I've never read her. Yeah. Okay, yeah, she passed in 2014. It makes sense though because I think a lot of I want to say a lot of female writers, prior to I don't know 25 years ago or whatever, used initials. So
So that,
it just ungendered them or whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember her name, but there's a woman that wrote this really cheesy sci-fi 80s movie that I watched a few years back. What was that? And I can't remember the name of it, but I was looking up some stuff on the movie and the writer was a female and it was some initials, and I remember like digging a little more into it, and I found out that
Yeah.
she used the initials because she had trouble getting into the industry, and then yeah, I think she wrote some really good stuff. This movie, I wish I could remember the name of it. I would
Yeah.
name drop it now, but
It makes sense, and like it's shitty, but like definitely an interesting concept
yeah, I just wish I had the
that people
name
have to do that.
of the
Yeah.
movie, but oh well. Okay, my final pick, right?
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, I would have said the obvious, Roadside Picnic, but we already talked about it early on, so I feel like if
Mhm.
people want to go seek that out, they already know about it. So the one I'm going to recommend is actually, and I wonder if I've recommended this on another podcast too, but it's kind of where I got my name, Dhalgren.
Mhm.
Even though now I'm known as Doll Baby. Thank you very much. So yeah, Dhalgren is a novel by Samuel Delaney,
Hmm.
and came out in the did it come out in the 70s? I don't know. Anyway, so I read this book because I was reading one of my favorite authors. I don't remember which one it was. It was one of his books, William Gibson. And he
Mhm.
talks I think it was in like the intro or something. He talks about this book, Dahlgren, and he says like you have to read this. You have to read it. And so okay, well, so I started looking into it, and it's an interesting thing to look up because you go and you find stuff on it, and people are saying, yeah, I got this book and I started to read it, but I couldn't finish it. Like I couldn't get through it.
Mhm.
And then you get, you find reviews of people that are just like, oh, whoa, man, this like blew my mind. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm a little nervous about trying this, but I eventually found it and bought it, and I read it, and it it had the kind of impact on me that Stalker had. I was in awe of it, and I had
Mhm.
no clue what it meant. like like I probably have even less of a grasp on this book than I do on Stalker. I don't know what this author intended with the book, but it had a profound effect on me. So that's one way that it relates to Stalker. But another way that it relates
Mhm.
is it's set in a post-apocalyptic dystopia, a city in the United States called, I think the city's called Bologna. So it's this made up city in the Midwest. And at the beginning, you're introduced to this character called the Kid, just simply referred
Mhm.
to as the Kid. And that changes a bit as you get into the novel. And then at times you're not clear if the kid is the kid or if it's some other person or like what's his real name.
Mhm.
I think he's kind of, yeah, there's issues with identity with him. Like he doesn't really know who he is. And he's exploring this city that's like really sparsely populated. It never tells you what happened, like what apocalyptic calamity, befell
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
civilization. And it's not like Mad Max. It's not like The Matrix. It's not like Terminator. People aren't living in just abject misery. It's not
Mhm.
horrifying. It's just the population has been thinned out. People are living a little bit differently, although
Mhm.
not in like some weird, like horrible poverty. It's a
Yeah.
weird book, dude. And it's not, it's like I think you're going to either find it under literature or under science fiction, and it's
Hmm.
definitely, if you wikied it, it'd probably describe it as science fiction. But it, like Stalker, it's not overtly science fiction. There are no sci-fi tropes in this book. I mean, almost no sci-fi tropes. It's
Yeah.
it's not full of
Interesting.
battles and aliens and
Yeah.
weird stuff like
Advanced
that.
technology. Yeah.
No, 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 none of that. And I don't even really know how to describe the plot. It's not like it doesn't really have a plot. It just meanders, and I think to a lot of people it would probably be just an incredible bore, but for whatever reason it grabbed me, and I will admit that that's not always the case with books like this. Sometimes I pick what book did I pick up and try to read that's like this? Oh man, I can't think of it, but there's an older classic that's kind of like this, and Ulysses. I think it's Ulysses,
Mm.
and I just didn't get
It's like
it.
no way.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's been others like I think, is it The Crying of Lot 49? Yeah, your audience is like, oh, you idiot.
So
Yeah, I
someone
think
is once again yelling at their device.
yeah, yeah. It's a Thomas Pynchon novel, and it's not a thick novel. Like, but I mean, I remember starting that and just going, what the hell is this? So I'm totally sympathetic. If you go try to read this book and then you just want to throw it at me, I get it. Like, I totally get it. But
No.
I had to recommend it because it's it's so bizarrely different and just
Mhm.
not explicitly sci-fi in the way that we think about it today. So yeah, it's an interesting book for sure.
That's a great connection too. I love I love the yeah, sci-fi, but it's not explicitly sci-fi. Like you tell people that Stalker is a sci-fi movie and they watch and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? There's no
I know
aliens, there's no
they want to
yeah.
fight you.
Yeah. It's just three guys being weird. It's just three Russian dudes
Yeah.
talking, you know? I, I wish I had a joke about three Russian guys talking, but I don't. Sweet. That's a great pick. Didn't know that about the Dahlgren name. I didn't know that that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's the pool. That's the
You
pool
learn something new every day.
for sure. Well, when you're done, yeah, when we're done, go look it up and read a little bit about it online. I think you'll get a quick sense of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not a big novel guy, but I might check this out. This one might pique my interest.
We'll check it out from the
So
library or
yeah,
Kindle it or whatever.
yeah, and if it's not for me,
Yep.
so be it. But that's a good pick. I dig that. So for my last recommendation, I haven't done a movie yet, and so I'm gonna have to do one of those. I was considering doing Tree of Life, something sort of out there, visual poetry kind of vibes, but I'm gonna go a different route, and I'm gonna do something that sort of connects to the extended shots, the lack of editing, and that's really the only connection that Stalker has with this movie that I'm going to recommend. But the movie that I'm going to recommend, it's this. I think it's 1997, a 1990s Japanese crime thriller movie that is actually one of Bong Joon-ho's favorite movies. And if you watch any of his movies and then you watch this movie, you'll totally recognize that. But this movie also uses a lot of really extended takes in a pretty different way to how it's done in Stalker, but still done to great effect. But yeah, a lot of like really, really long takes, just like camera sort of like set up in the corner of a room, and you just like watch scenes unfold. You watch like the characters move within the frame, and they have their conversations, and scenes play out that way as opposed to sort of like how we're used to them playing out. But other than that, like still an awesome movie, a really weird out there movie, but one that is, I think, super enjoyable. And if you're a fan of like David Fincher and again like Bong Joon Ho, you'll probably enjoy this movie. So the movie that I'm recommending is it's called Cure, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I don't know if you've seen this movie or heard of it, but
No.
it is quite rad. And I would highly recommend it, which is why I'm recommending it.
Cure? Cure?
Yeah. Cure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm writing that down.
Yeah. It's a cool movie. And, like I said, the connections to Stalker's sort of start and end with the extended takes, but, the extended shots, but still a great movie and certainly worth watching.
Who did you say was the director?
Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Kiyosshi.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you say it's a live action film?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's cool. Again, very, very David Fincher, Bong Joon-ho kind of vibes.
Yeah, that's another thing this is a Japanese movie, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Yeah, that's another. I haven't seen enough Japanese movies. There's a couple of movies, Wong Kar-wai movies, that are in my queue, in my HBO queue.
Oh, hell yeah.
And one just popped up the other day that I don't think I had even heard of it. Golly, I can't remember what it is, but I watched one about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm blanking on names, man.
Japanese or
like well, I mean, no, this was a Wong Kar-wai movie. It was Hong Kong.
Fallen Angels.
No, that's the one. So that's the one that's in my queue right now that I just saw. I hadn't heard of. Chungking Express is the one I saw about a month ago, and that's one of those movies that's just like, it just lets you get to know these characters. It's not in a hurry to do a bunch of other things. And, so I need to watch more movies like that. I need to watch more probably Korean movies, Chinese movies, Japanese. That's the great thing, right? It's a blessing and a curse. There's just so much out there. You sit down in front of the TV and you're like, okay,
oh yeah,
now what?
Yeah, I feel I think one of my big things for this year for resolutions is to check out more like Eastern European cinema. I feel like I went through my Asian cinema sort of phase, but the Eastern European stuff I feel like that's a big blind spot for me. But I have seen Stalker, so that's one off the list.
There you go.
And I need to see the Silver Globe one. Dahl, before we get out of here, let's run through our recommendations one more time. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3. What do you got?
The Quiet Earth. It's a movie, New Zealand movie, on the Silver Globe, Polish, I think. And then Dhalgren. It's a book.
Dhalgren, recommending Dhalgren.
Yeah, pretty good size book too. So just don't hate me if you don't like it.
Never. No hate allowed here. It's a no hate zone.
Cool.
I've got the TV show Chernobyl. I've got the novel Children of Men by P.D. James, and I've got the Japanese crime thriller film Cure by Kiyoshi Kurosawa.
That's a good grouping, man.
I think we crushed it.
That grouping. Yeah.
I think we totally crushed it. This has been a ton of fun. I feel like this has been super insightful. Listeners, I hope it's been as enjoyable for you as it has been for me. Dahl, I hope it's also been as enjoyable for you as it has been for me.
Oh, I'm smoking a cigarette. It was so enjoyable. I mean,
some of our younger listeners might not get that reference, but
no.
We'll let them Google it.
Earmuffs, younger listeners.
But yeah, there you have it. That's Stalker. Thanks again for joining. This has been a ton of fun. We'll be back next week. We're talking Rear Window. We've got a pretty hefty crew that will be on for that. But until then, definitely make sure to check out all of the Dollhouse stuff on the Screenage Wasteland YouTube page. There, also check out older episodes of the Canon there. Leave us a comment, hit us with the subscribe, all of that good stuff. And, we will just continue to be pumping out, articles, write-ups, YouTube videos, and podcasts for all of you screenagers in the meantime. So come hang out with us. There's a lot of fun stuff happening over here. Dahl, thank you again. And we'll catch you on the flip side.
Dude, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for doing these. You're doing an amazing job. You're crushing it. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man.